Hello, my name is Holly Wendt, and my favorite thing is cycling.
Welcome to the Finding Favorites podcast, where we explore your favorite things without using an algorithm. Here's your host, Leah Jones.
Hello and welcome to Finding Favorites. I'm your host, Leah Jones, and this is the podcast where we learn about people's favorite things and get recommendations without using an algorithm. Jen Milkowski's legacy continues. I am joined tonight by an author who shares a publisher with Jen. And so I'm very excited tonight to have Holly Wendt on the podcast. Holly is the author of Heading North, which is being published in like 2 weeks from the day of the record. They are a recipient of the Robert and Charlotte Barron Fellowship for Creative and Performing Artists of the American Antiquarian Society and fellowships from the Gentle Foundation and Hambidge Center. I should have. A 2023 Peter Taylor Fellow at the Kenyon Review Writers Workshop, Holly has also been a member of workshops at Breadloaf, Swanee, and Tin House. Their work has appeared in Passages North, Shenandoah, Barrel House, Memorious, and elsewhere. Holly is a former baseball prospectus contributor and contributing editor for The Classical. Their nonfiction has appeared in Bodies Built for Game, the Prairie Schooner Anthology of Contemporary Sports Writing, The Rumpus, and Sport Literate. Holly is the Associate Professor of English and Creative Writing at Lebanon Valley College in Pennsylvania. Their debut novel, Heading North, will be published on November 8th, and that is what brings us together. Holly, how are you doing tonight?
I am doing really, really well. Thank you so much for asking. And it is, kind of wonderful and terrifying to be just a couple of weeks away from publication day.
Yeah. So let's just get into it. What's the on one foot description of the book Heading North?
Okay. So in Heading North, we find closeted professional ice hockey player Victor, who has lost his clandestine boyfriend Nikolai and his entire former ice hockey team in a catastrophic plane crash, and he is left to rebuild his life in the NHL while playing for the only team in the league that is managed by a woman. This woman, in a tribute to the dynastic nature of so much of professional hockey, happens to be Nikolai's stepmother, Lilia. Victor and Lilia grapple with their private griefs and imperiled personal and professional relationships while trying to keep their livelihoods in the sport that they love.
Wow. That's so much. I'm curious. So for me, this podcast was my COVID hobby. And as I was talking to authors, I was like, what if this book happened during lockdown? What if it happened before? So I'm always curious with novels. What was your timeline from inspiration to publication?
It has been such a long timeline. I wish I could say this came out of lockdown. No, the actual historical incident that inspired Heading North happened in 2011. An actual Russian ice hockey team, Lokomotiv Yaroslavl, was involved in a plane crash, and the entire team was killed in the plane crash. And then in 2012, I actually started writing the book. So it has been a very long time coming. It's been through many, many drafts. It has looked like many different things. And I will say that when I started submitting the book to small presses, including Braddock Avenue Books, the book's publisher, it was just before lockdown happened. And so that kind of ground everything to a halt. Many of us involved in this specific process are academics, so we were all losing our minds trying to flip our classrooms to online and trying to figure out what that meant for students who didn't have Wi-Fi at home and how they would manage having no public places to go to use the Wi-Fi. And so I completely understand things went a little slowly, as they do. But here, as we are approaching, I'm really excited about the book. I think it looks really nice. I've got a beautiful cover designed by a designer named Savannah Adams. And so really happy about that. But it has been a decade and change at this point.
And were you, because a number of your credits are sports writing credits, Were you a hockey writer? Are you a hockey player? What's your relationship to hockey?
I am a hockey dilettante. Insofar, where I grew up in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, there is no school hockey. There is no club hockey. The nearest hockey rink is 20 minutes away in a place where there's no public transportation. And it is a very expensive sport. So
It's a very expensive sport, yeah.
especially if you're trying to outfit kids who just keep growing and they keep needing new things. So I grew up playing pond hockey in the most amateurish sort of fashion, but never competitive. And then I've been a lifelong fan of professional ice hockey. I was a kid in the 90s, so during the heyday of Mario Lemieux and Jaromir Jagr. And I'm from Pennsylvania, so I'm a Pittsburgh Penguins fan and just been tracking that. And the lovely thing about when this book sort of sprang into being was that it also coincided with what felt like the apex of hockey coverage. It was before all of sports media took that disastrous pivot to video that turned out to be very fake advice. And so in the early 2010s, you had all of these journalists actually covering the sport because there were so many new online outlets that were actually paying jobs. There were so many fan-run blogs like SB Nation and Sports on Earth communities really making the sports blogosphere run. And
it's strange to think about that, because I started blogging in 2003 and I worked in social media and PR firms for 15 years. And I forgot that SB Nation was like a fan site at first.
yes.
And how it was like very grassroots, and it'd be like, oh, I'm the Chicago Blackhawks person. I'm this. Like, people would like pick their team and report on it as fans, and then some of those people became journalists, and then SB Nation, I think they got acquired, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there are still a couple of very, very limited resources now being devoted to those, because those fan sites were not well paid, but paid. They had some funding to keep it going because they generated a lot of traffic.
Right.
And social media at that point was new enough and not too toxic. So teams were really leaning into it.
Yeah.
The Pittsburgh Penguins equipment manager had a Twitter account, and he would just take pictures of him doing everything. Like, here's the coffee brewing, here's the skate sharpener, here's me sharpening skates, here's me sewing tags into jerseys, and just this wealth of insider information. And I was so lucky to be doing that thing at the exact right time to take advantage of all of that.
I just saw a TikTok that the Penguins have players deliver season tickets.
Yes, they have been doing that for a very long time, and it's usually a surprise, and it's usually pretty cute, and there's a lot of great dog footage and baby footage and things like that. But yeah, they have the players go out and do these kind of cold knocks, and it's very charming.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw one yesterday where it was not a surprise. The family knew, but like it was like 8 people on the porch, everyone in their Penguins gear.
Yes.
And I didn't know the player walking up with like literally a duffel bag of tickets. It looked like a fun day. When this original plane crash happened, and you're doing some hockey writing, when this story came to you, were you also doing writing about queer relationships, or how did that become the central relationship or question? I don't know if central if that's fair, but the secret at the center of this story.
Victor is the genesis of this novel. There is a second point of view that was the more difficult part of this novel to figure out and get right. Who that person was changed a couple times in the process, but Victor and Nikolai were always the heart of this book, and sort of Victor's life in absence of Nikolai, and that's been a staple of my fiction kind of as long as I've been writing queer relationships primarily, or characters that are doing interesting things with gender or gender performance, gender expression. That's just sort of where my work has always been.
Yeah.
And I will say, too, one of the deeply depressing sticking points for me as a hockey fan is that the NHL is the only professional league in North America where well, not professional league, the highest echelon of professional leagues in North America that does not yet have a current out player or former player. There is a minor league player by the name of Luke Prokop who is on an NHL contract but has never played in an NHL game. He is currently in the ECHL roster of the Nashville Predators system. And so, you know, the fact that hockey specifically has been this closed off space has been really frustrating as a fan, because we know that at that point it's not just happenstance. The math doesn't work out like surely someone.
Right.
So what is it about hockey and hockey culture that makes that the case? And
Right.
I was like, we could imagine something different or better.
And you also put then his partner who dies in the crash, then it's his stepmom as the coach?
The general manager.
No.
So
The general manager.
Yeah. So she's not on ice. She's the one who decides who gets traded, who gets signed, who gets kept.
Okay. She's the money ball person.
Yep.
Okay.
Very much so.
All right. Great. How are you celebrating the launch of the book?
So on November 8th, I am delighted to actually be having hosted my launch by Midtown Scholar Bookstore, best bookstore in the country. Woo!
Woo, woo.
And I will be in conversation with the novelist and short story writer Curtis Smith, who is also a Braddock Avenue Books
Nice.
alum, and who also has a new book out this fall called The Lost and the Blind. That one's out from Running Wild Press. So I'm super excited to chat with Curtis about heading north and to do it in my favorite local bookstore.
That's fabulous. And it looks like you also have some. I was looking quickly, and I have gotten so used to things being Zoom. So it looks like you're doing a combination of online readings and in-person events.
Yes, I have been really fortunate that I've had really great response and support from some places where I've got some community. So I'm doing a little mini road trip. About 10 days after the book launches, I will be heading to Windsor, Ontario, to Biblioasis Bookshop.
Nice.
Biblioasis puts out such gorgeous books. And then I'll zip across New York State to do an event at the Dream Away Lodge reading series hosted by Kate Senecal, and then cap off that little weekend with a conversation at Buffalo Street Books in Ithaca, New York, with Jennifer Saverin Kelly, whose new debut novel, End Papers, came out earlier this year about a genderqueer bookbinder in post 9/11 New York that is just gripping. And if you are somebody who likes books that are full of characters who know how to do interesting things, it's just catnip. It's so cool.
Is there anything else about heading north that I haven't asked you that you would be bummed that you didn't get to share?
I would say simply that I'm excited to be sharing this particular book because it's been a dream of mine to see more literary novels about sports that are willing to sort of expand the edges of what it means to be a book about sports. And so Chad Harbaugh's The Art of Fielding did that. It's a baseball novel, but it's really a college novel, but it's also really about love and obsession and failure and all of those interesting things. And Emily Nemmons' The Cactus League, which just sort of spirals around one central character in a really fascinating way, but that is exceptionally true to life in getting into the baseballness of baseball in a way that's very, very appealing. And and Valente's this Desert Sky Before Us, in which two sisters reconcile, and one of them used to be a NASCAR driver, which
I love
again,
it.
kind of looking at women in sports in interesting ways. And I don't think any of this is possible without books like Richard Wagamise's Indian Horse, which was also a really foundational book for me as I was working on this. But I also wanted to write a book that was about queer joy. And I love Indian Horse. It's a gorgeous novel, but joy, understandably, is in short supply there.
Yeah. Great. So people should pre-order or order the book, Heading North. Get a copy of it. If you are going to be in Pennsylvania, Ontario, New York, get to one of these independent bookstores and join Holly for a reading and an event.
Yeah, I would love to see y'all there.
So, Holly, your book is what brings us together tonight. But on Finding Favorites, we also talk to people about their favorite things. So you had such a wonderful list of favorites. But where should we start?
I think I have to start with cycling. Because
Fabulous.
I didn't learn to ride a bicycle in any real sense of the word until I was 39 years old. It was one of my pandemic endeavors. And I fell hook, line, and sinker in love with the world of professional cycling. So as a complete bicycle newbie, I went from don't know what this is, am terrified of bicycles, to kind of glued to my television screen at 4 a.m. because there's a race in Turkey and I'm watching it. And then doing a whole bunch of long distance bike rides starting last year. So this is my new obsession.
I love it. Let's start with the moment during COVID lockdown what made you say, all right, bike, I'm going to tackle you now?
So this is a bit of a dovetail with one of my other favorites, which is the fiber arts. So knitting, spinning, weaving, all of that.
Okay.
The fiber arts community does this thing every July called the Tour de Fleece. And the point of it is you spin yarn while the bicyclists are spinning their way across France.
Okay.
And so I have done the spinning the yarn part for years. But I'd never actually watched any of the Tour de France while doing that. And so I decided this was the time I'm going to actually watch a little bit of whatever this bicycle race is, because I didn't know about it. Sure, why not? What else are we doing? And so I watched, 15 minutes of the Tour de France, and then was suddenly a junkie. I could not stop. It more or less replaced my personality for most of that summer. And by the end of that summer, I had watched so much cycling. I was like, maybe I could do it. Maybe I could do it just a little bit. And so then the difficult part was finding a bicycle to get in.
Bicycles got so short, so hard to get during the pandemic. I think people forget used cars and bicycles were just gone.
Yes. And so there's a used bike shop not too far from home. We went to look for bicycles, and everything was sort of janky and very well used. But I found a deeply half broken Raleigh mountain bike.
Okay.
That weighed probably 35 pounds. It was just a beast of a thing. But I actually successfully pedaled it around the parking lot, and it more or less fit, and I wasn't in excruciating pain. And I said, sure, why not? And then that worked out. Took it to some local trails. I'm still afraid to ride on the road around here. I live on roads with no shoulders in the middle of nowhere. it's a bad scene. But yeah, within 2 months of that, I had bought an indoor home trainer.
Okay.
I stocked a much larger, much more prolific bicycle shop about an hour away. Stocked their website for new merchandise drops, kind of
Yep.
daily, and then found a real road bike and called them and was like, "This bike, what size is it? Can you tell me about it? Is it available?" And they're like, "Yeah, it's in the store." I'm like, "I will be there in an hour and 15 minutes." And, I sort of arrived in a froth and kind of probably looking somewhat unhinged. But they just said, there's the alley. Go have a good time. See what you think. And then that was sort of the beginning of the real process, because it was by far the nicest kind of a piece of equipment, anything sporting goods I had ever touched, let alone brought home. And it's one of those things where you sort of naughtily justify it. You're like, but it's a bicycle. It's good for me.
Yes. And tell me about that bike. What's the make? What's the model?
Ooh, thank you. It's a Specialized LA, which I read bicycle reviews for weeks, and a bunch of cycling websites were like, this is a really great entry level bike. So it's light enough to be kind of reasonably interesting, and it's a good road bike. It's not going to fall apart. It has a frame that will be worth upgrading, where you're going to upgrade it to a better drivetrain kind of situation. And so far it has been just a treat. I love it to little bits and pieces. I probably ride on my indoor trainer 3 or 4 times a week. And then this summer it held up to a 600 kilometers in 6 days ride from Toronto to Montreal as part of. Yeah, like I said, I went all in.
You went all in.
Yep. And that ride is the People with AIDS bike rally, and it raises funds to support people with HIV and AIDS through the People with AIDS location in Toronto, Trellis, and ACCM in Montreal. And I found out about that because of another knitter, the Canadian Stephanie Pearl McPhee, who does this rally. And I'd been donating to her efforts. And then once I figured out, like, oh, I can ride a bike, maybe I could do that. And then we did. And it was so, so cool. Hardest thing I've ever done, but really, really beautiful.
Now, were there, so something to know about me is that when I was 19 years old, I had an internship at a program called Bike Aid, which was a cross-country bicycle trip. There were 5 routes that summer: San Francisco, Seattle, and LA, Montreal, and maybe like Atlanta, or like a short East Coast trip. And they all met up in DC on the same day to do lobbying. So some people were biking 3,600 miles, and some people were biking, just a few hundred. And I was someone who rode a bike, but I wasn't a cyclist. I still aspire to be a cyclist. I have a long haul trucker that's very outfitted with I have headlights that when I pedal, they're powered by pedaling.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I got hit by a car riding my bike, and I used the settlement money to buy the nicest long haul trucker I could.
I mean, silver lining, the best silver lining of all things in that circumstance. Yeah.
So when I was routing these cyclists from San Francisco to DC, I didn't fully understand sometimes what I was doing to them by putting 2 centuries back to back. So I'm curious, when you're doing 600 kilometers over 6 days, are there some very long days and some short days, or are they all about 80 to 100 kilometers? Is it hilly? Is it mountainous? What's it? I don't know anything.
So that particular route is designed just in the most humane way that it can be.
Okay.
The 5 of the days are between 100 and 120 kilometers. But the first 2 days are the hardest. So if you can just get to day 3, which is short, only like 50 or 60 kilometers, you've made it over the hump. That short day feels like a real gift. And then days 4, 5, and 6 are again up in that 112, 108-ish sort of vein. And there are some hills. Again, the first 2 days are the hilliest. And then it gets somewhat flatter as you progress toward Montreal until you get to Montreal. And then you actually bike up to the park at Mont Royal. And so your last hill is pretty considerable. But it's a very carefully designed route to be relatively accessible. If you can do the length of time, there are no truly terrible climbing days. There are some hills, but there's also no time on it. So you can take more or less as long as you need. And it's so beautifully supported. There are volunteer cars that are always sort of riding by the convoy, making sure everyone's okay, bringing you water or snacks if you need them. There are rest stops that are just really well supplied, like every different kind of gummy candy in the world. I was just so stoked about that. Juice boxes, just primo juice boxes. And, they're really making it as possible as they can for more people to participate. And so it's a decent crowd, close to 300 riders for the 6 days. And then some, you can also do a 1-day ride or a 3-day ride. And so it's also catering to how much time you have as a rider, as a person, because it is a big chunk of time.
Yeah. Well, they want you to be successful, to come back next year, to recruit other people. So it doesn't, for a fundraising ride, it doesn't help them to like make it really hard on,
Right.
To make it a rough go.
Yeah.
Was it, my assumption is someone carried your bags?
Yes. So
that helps.
Each rider gets 2 big Tupperware bins to put their camping stuff, because we camp in the evenings, your clothes, whatever else you might want to have with you, your knitting, your spinning, to have in camp. And then they load them onto trucks and they go from campsite to campsite, so that when you get to camp, they're there waiting for you. And then they also are lovely and wonderful and feed you handsomely. 3 meals a day and snacks and so on, so that you really have nothing to worry about except pedaling your bike, and maybe if you can do a little social media posting so that more folks will donate to the cause.
Yeah. And so that's what, over the course of 3 years, you went from 0 to 600 kilometers?
Yeah. My kind of first step toward that, last fall, I did the Seagull Century in Salisbury, Maryland, which is 100 miles, all in one day, but pancake flat.
Okay.
And I just did that again this weekend. So I found out for the first time that I can ride in torrential rain. Last 40 miles was just buckets. And we all survived, and it was all good. But this year's route was 105.7 miles, and that last 5.7 felt personal.
Yeah, especially when you're saying it's a century.
Yeah.
Then you got to bring it in at 100 miles. That's the rule.
But we do stop at Assateague, so that's pretty cool. You get to ride over the fun little bridge and look for ponies that have yet to make an appearance. But I have hope that there will, in fact, be ponies some year that I can see.
I don't know what you're talking. Is it like wild ponies?
Yes. Assateague Island, off the southern shore of Maryland, is I think it's actually a national park. if I remember correctly, but it is populated indeed with wild ponies.
I
And
didn't know there were any wild horses east of the Rockies.
yes, and they are wild ponies, and they are very motivated by the snacks you have in your picnic cooler.
Okay.
So the big worry is not that you will never see ponies, but that if you're on the beach and you have a cooler, you will have ponies in your cooler, you will have ponies on your blankets, and they do not suffer fools. So
It's a terrible problem I would love to have one day.
yes.
Talk to me about professional cycling beyond just Tour de France during Tour de Fleece.
The thing that I learned, and probably the reason why it has really stuck, and that I seem to be very much invested in cycling, and not just in my normal sports nerd sort of way. I do like to watch some sports, but cycling, the evolution of a race is exceptionally narrative, in so much that watching a bicycle race feels in many ways like watching plots unfold. It's very novelistic because the shape of the race at the beginning of the race is not necessarily the shape it will take at the end. There are frequently changes in leadership. There are frequently monumental collapses that happen. You know, someone who is absolutely crushing the field suddenly just has a day where the legs are not there and they can lose 30 or 40 minutes at a time. That just happened in the Vuelta a España this past August. Somebody who's been in world beating form has one bad day, even like one bad hour, and that just costs you. So there is this great sense of drama about it. There's also these long, quiet lulls that I live for because cycling races are very long. The spectating process.
And these are typically or exclusively road races and not, I forget what the track is, velodrome.
Yeah. I have watched a little bit of track cycling. I like road. I like road better.
Yeah.
I watch a little bit of cyclocross. Like now that the road season is over, I will turn to cyclocross for my fix. Gravel is super fun, but much more limited in coverage because it's just so much harder to cover.
Sure.
The terrain messes with it. Coverage, and also, a bunch of media bikes buzzing around is not really quite in the spirit of gravel. So the road coverage is the most extensive, and it lasts so long. So you might have one of the monuments 260, 280 kilometers long. So you're just parked there for 7 hours.
Wow.
And there are no commercial breaks. So there are whole announcing teams that will kind of tag in and out. So-and-so's going for a coffee, so-and-so's going for lunch. And, six different commentators might be working the same race, and they each come in for various segments. But I actually really love the long quiet periods before anything really happens. Most races, there's 20 or 30 kilometers of exciting racing at the very beginning of the stage when the breakaway is trying to go. A small handful of riders gets ahead of the peloton, and they're just going to ride like blazes in hopes they make it to the end before the peloton catches them. And the peloton makes a calculated decision like, yeah, we think we can bring back those 8 guys. So y'all go have a good time. We'll see you in 170 kilometers. And then from that point, usually, until the math dictates that it's time to actually start chasing, it's just quiet and kind of nothing happens. The breakaway is just doing their quiet thing alone and not really able to do anything except pedal their brains out. And the peloton is chatting and having snacks and stopping for nature breaks and whatever. They're very polite about how they refer to that sort of thing. I appreciate that. And so the announcers just have to what do we say when nothing is
Right.
happening? So they just tell stories. A bunch of them are former pro cyclists. Some of them are kind of professional cycling commentators who've just been around for ages and have seen everything. And so they're just kind of chatting away in the most jovial kind of fashion and pointing out landmarks and historical monuments along the way. I just adore it. It fills that sort of space that I'm guessing people who like to go work in cafes fill.
Yeah.
Like just the sense of you have company, you have pals in the room, and that's kind of what I do in the summer months. Just sort of there's a race on somewhere, so flip that on, and then have company around the house other than the cats,
Right. And has the cycling world recovered from the scandals with Lance Armstrong?
I would say yes for the most part. Not in the US, at least as far as cycling fandom and coverage goes. It's still exceptionally rare to find someone in the US who knows what's going on, who knows that there's a race other than the Tour de France.
Right.
Although hopefully that might change. American Sepp Kuss won the Vuelta a España, and he's from Durango, Colorado, and it's just the most fun dude. And so
he's also live in Durango.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
What a beautiful part of the world. Just gorgeous.
I worked at Fort Lewis College for 2 years. I was a hall director. And then I stayed for a year to see if I was a Colorado person.
Uh-huh.
And I am very indoorsy, it turns out. So I moved to Chicago. Yeah.
I lived in Casper, Wyoming for 5 years. And so, I don't like to be cold.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I can imagine. I mean, I've been gone from there for 20 years. So if there was a professional athlete enduring, if he, I'm sure, was a child when I was there. But if you grow up cycling in those mountains or doing like up to Uray or up to Silverton, your stamina is got to be bananas.
Oh, yes. And, all that altitude time. And his real call to fame is actually being what is called a domestique. He's much more of a helper than someone who is going for victories on his own. So he's completely a surprise winner of the Vuelta. And it was just one of those truly feel-good stories because here's the guy who has sacrificed himself for team leaders over and over and over again, doing the grunt work on the really brutal mountain stages. Finally was able to get something really nice for himself. And that was not without drama.
Sure.
His team leaders were maybe thinking that maybe they should be in the lead, but Sepp didn't give it up either. Like he didn't fail, he didn't fall apart, and so that was a little juicy and the thing that nobody could stop talking about. But he's a super fun person to root for, so I am hoping that will nudge the needle forward a little bit on American cycling. But there is certainly still skepticism about PEDs, steroid use, banned substances, and so on. But because of that, every time there is a positive test, and there have been a small handful recently, that gets covered really widely, and journalists are still asking those questions during the Tour de France and the Vuelta and the Giro. When somebody's putting up fabulous numbers over and over and over again, like, we have to ask this, and nobody wants to be asked this, and everyone gets a little bit salty, but that's the lay of the land.
My understanding of it, and I don't know how many people are on a team, is that kind of like a flock of geese. Like, someone's got to literally like start the wind moving in the right direction, right? Like, someone's got to be at the top of the peloton causing the wake those are water terms. I don't know I don't know like the road terms for it, but like it's a team sport as far as like somebody's doing the hard work of being at the front of the peloton, and you kind of rotate in and out. And when they're on those long stretches, do like whole countries, does the whole peloton just sort of cooperate with each other, or do you only cooperate within your team?
So for the big, like the quieter parts, or once the chase starts going, usually it is separated out. Who are the teams that really want this to come back? So surely none of the teams who have riders in the breakaway will work to bring it back. They're like, no, if you want to bring them back, you have to do it. We're waiting. And then usually the teams that have more money, more sort of power and force in the peloton, the ones who are the teams of the favorites, will do much of that work. And it usually means putting 1 or 2 or 3 dedicated domestiques whose real specialty is just doing that kind of kilometer eating, mile eating, face in the wind kind of work. And honestly, the rider who got me into cycling, Tim de Klerk, is the guy for this. Probably the most recognizable guy on the front of the peloton, who has never had a career win, who is doing nothing but eating up those 150, 200 kilometers in the middle of a race just to keep the breakaway within a reasonable distance, or to start to bring it back so that the sprinters can sprint. And it's such a thankless, I don't want to say thankless. They do get thanked. Their teammates appreciate them, but it's such a job without glory. And this brings me all the way back to thinking about it as novel writing. There's just all of this slog where it doesn't look like anything is happening. It just feels like a lot of hard work. And it's also ultimately invisible. Right. And I think it's really beautiful to kind of be able to see that on the screen. I actually kind of like that part of the writing process, the private toil part of it. And so, yeah, it's been kind of an interesting metaphorical journey. Thinking about cycling as also somebody who likes really long books and whose process is just excruciatingly long. I never have any idea if something is going to work until I've actually written it. And then I have to write it and then be like, oh, that didn't work. Chuck that, start over. Which is a terrible process, of course.
I would say what I've learned from interviewing so many authors is that truly everyone has a different process. I've had some people on who are outliners who can like make a 120 scene outline and then pick and choose what scene they're working on today. That's one person.
I admire that so deeply.
Yeah. But more people are kind of butts in seats, what's going to happen, being surprised by the story.
Because if I know what's going to happen, I find that I lose some of the interest in actually getting there. I'm writing to find out what's going to happen, very much as Joan Didion said, I write to find out what I think. Because until I've written it, I actually don't know.
Right. Now, I know there's like amateur cyclocross because in Chicago it's very popular. And I've gone to watch, and I used to think I would try doing it, but it turns out, again, very indoorsy, very Wenthy. Cyclocross is not my future. But is there any amateur racing that you want to try to do? Or that's even available?
Oh, that's such a question. I have gone to one local cyclocross race as a spectator, and it looked so cool, but it also requires such good bike handling skills. Yeah. And I have no muscle memory for any of those things because I'm brand new to it. And I'm also very aware now, as someone on the north side of 40, how much it hurts when you get hurt and how long it takes to get unhurt in a way that was not true for like 14-year-olds and 18-year-olds and even 24-year-olds
Yes.
on the whole.
Yep.
So that has been a bit of a preventative. I have not really thought about road racing. I think that would be cool. I just don't know of any around.
Right.
There are lots of organized group rides of varying kinds in the area. There's a covered bridge one where you ride through Lancaster County through all the covered bridges. And
Oh,
you can
how
do,
nice.
Yeah, it's very bucolic. And there's a group that does, it's called Farm to Fork. And you ride from small farm to small farm and eat what their specialty is. So like,
Fabulous.
here, I had some lavender lemonade and a lavender cookie, and then I'm going to go to the goat cheese place. And, you just sort of tootle around and do that. And some folks are very clearly seeing how fast they can do it. And I think that's kind of interesting. Seagull Century, also, there are definitely people who are there to beat their times from last year or to win the Strava segments, all of that. And I think racing could be cool. I do have a bit of a competitive streak, but I also know that where I'm at, I would not be competitive. In the sense that I am new and not very fast. And also,
but you are also over 40, which would put you into like a master's class.
Ooh,
and it's less competitive.
Fair.
You're not competing with the 20-year-olds.
True, but in my
it's all
head,
by age, yeah.
In my head, I would be.
Yes.
And having watched cycling, the idea of riding in a peloton that close to so many people would be terrifying. Like I said, my bike handling skills are not great. And the way I keep everyone else safe around me is by trying to keep some distance, because my instinct is always just to panic. And that's not great if you're in a little pack of folk.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't ever done a big group ride like that, despite having helped organize one. And they go by my house. There's a bike shop 2 blocks south of me that like every Saturday and Sunday morning group rides leave from 2 blocks away. So they're either just getting started or it's the very end of the ride a few hours later. They go like up to the Baha'i Temple or up to the old Navy base. So I see them all the time, and it is something I aspire to do, but I currently have a frozen shoulder, which makes carrying my bike up and down the stairs not great. So I haven't ridden in a couple years, and I miss it a lot. Because I love it for like just like errands, tootling around Chicago.
Oh, yeah. I also admire anyone who has the guts to ride in a city. It seems like a superpower as far as I am concerned.
Yeah. Well, I choose quiet side streets. I'm a very cautious city rider. Partly because I've already been hit once.
Right.
Yeah. That made me more cautious. But I had a good friend. We were both recovering from crashes. He had hit a railroad track the wrong way.
Oh, no.
And broke his elbow. And then I had been hit. And so we did some rides around Chicago. This is like 2010. Just being company for each other to get our street sense, get comfortable again on the streets. And it was like this like wounded bike rider peloton of 2. Yeah.
The railroad crossings are no joke. That was one of the things that made me most nervous, just getting from where we were staying in Toronto to where the bike rally was leaving from. We had to cross the streetcar tracks a whole bunch of times.
Yeah.
And just like the absolute terror that I was going to get one of my tires stuck and then just go face first, like under
Yeah.
a car. It didn't happen. Happy about that.
Yeah.
But a lot of the people who live in Toronto who were on the ride, because it was mostly actual Canadians, just of course, because why wouldn't that be the case?
Yeah.
And everybody was like, oh, yeah, pretty much everyone biffs it on the tram tracks at some point. So, be careful. Cross at a 90-degree angle.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, but it's curving. How do I do that?
Yeah. Yeah. I grew up in a town with a lot of railroads. And so we had bike and railroad safety classes every year. And hitting them at 90 degrees was key.
That was one of the beautiful things about the bike rally, is that every single place there was a tracks crossing, there was a volunteer, like alerting people to the approach and sort of reminding everyone to go gently and cross safely. There were also folks at pretty much every intersection we interacted with, just again reminding folks where to go and how to go. And it was really nice for those of us who didn't have that kind of riding experience.
Yeah. So I'm curious, do you have your next bike on your wish list?
Oh, what a great question. My secret sort of bike that I am hoping for, that I just don't think I can justify, is a Kona. They're I believe a New Zealand cycling company. Sorry, Chapter 2 is the bike company, the Chapter 2 Kona. They're just so beautiful. But I also don't yet know enough about a bike to order one sight unseen off the internet without like fitting it, riding it, knowing how it feels. And I mean, maybe if I got a proper bike fitting, which is on my to-do list, maybe for this kind of off season, because trying to get a bike fit appointment in the summer is doesn't work. Too many people wanting the same thing. But maybe if I actually did that, you would get a firm enough sense of your own geometry, how much reach you need, and all of those little tiny fiddly measurements. But yeah, until I get a little bit more experience under my belt and even know, am I sitting on my actual bike correctly? That kind of thing. I probably couldn't justify it. And I did get a gravel bike off Facebook Marketplace
Nice.
that I can use on some of the unpaved rail trails around here. What I would love to do is just upgrade the crankset on my LA, because the one that's on my used gravel bike, which was some young man who knows what he's doing, just built that bike from scratch for a friend who used it for a while, and then he sold it. And it's just got a slightly better crankset on it, and it's just so nice. I was like, this is delicious, and the shifting so smooth, so exquisite. And then I have been talking to some folks who have bikes with the electronic shifting on it. I was like, is it nice? So like, I thought it was stupid until I got one, and then it changed my life forever. And so, that's in the wish list, but not urgently. I also love the idea of the lights that are charged by the pedals, because that's the thing that I always forget, is to charge my lights. Because they're all like USB chargeable situations. And I don't remember. And then I go long enough without needing to use them that when I go to throw them back on, their batteries have died. And that's also probably one of the other reasons that I'm not super keen on riding on the actual road.
Yeah, I also think if you're places where you don't have the infrastructure, if you don't have a shoulder and people aren't really accustomed to looking for cyclists, it's so dangerous because it's such a car-centered culture.
Oh, it is.
And SUV-centered, truck-centered. Yeah.
Every once in a while you find folks who seem to be annoyed by the existence of cyclists, which is not ideal.
No.
I think I just have to get a little bit braver with my explorations, though, because there are a couple of septuagenarians that are very clearly cycling on the road with some regularity right by my house. And I'm like, okay, I could probably get a little bolder here and just try not to be cycling at school bus time or everyone's coming home from work time. And I would probably be fine. But it's also in the middle of the Appalachians. And it's so hilly, just so hilly. So I could also be less of a weenie in that way too.
Yeah. Well, Holly, I asked you this question about your book, but also, is there anything about cycling, about racing, your own cycling experience, your hopes for cycling that I didn't ask you about that you'd like to mention?
I would love if more folks would give watching cycling a try. And it's really difficult because there's not many places sort of in U.S. media to watch it.
Yeah.
But, at least around Tour de France time, give it a whack because that's usually broadcast somewhere. Because it's probably different than most people would expect it to be. And I think it's a sport that's actually very friendly to people who would not think of themselves as sports people. Because it doesn't, at least in the televised sense. Of course, the people who are beside the road are very much in the let's paint our chests and run up and down in Speedos and the whole 9 yards. But the ways in which people are commentating on the sport feel to me very nuanced, very interesting. You are just as likely, at least using like Eurosport or GCN's coverage, to get women commenting on men's races, men commenting on women's races, women commenting on women's races, who are all some sort of mix of former pros and cycling professionals, in a way that I do think is really interesting and egalitarian. In a lot of American sports media, you generally find it's women who are talking about women's sports.
Right.
Which is great to have women's voices talking about women's sports. But if the goal is to say, but sports are sports and we could all pay attention to all of these things, it reinforces those sort of boxes in ways that I don't think are especially helpful or respectful necessarily. And at least in my experience, there hasn't been as much sort of commentating bombast. It's just like, here's a couple of folks who are having a conversation and no one's screaming into their microphones, which, as someone with some skittish cats, really appreciates because I'll go watch the Phillies game after this, and as soon as the volume goes up on the announcer's voice, both cats just sort of scatter in absolute terror. And so it's just sort of companionable and interesting, and probably full of a lot of history that folks aren't aware of, again, particularly American listeners. So it's worth seeing if you can hunt down some of the European coverage to enjoy.
And are you watching it on like an ESPN2, ESPN3, or are you watching it on the web? Are you finding digital broadcasts?
Digital broadcasts. In Peacocks, they have some major race coverage, and that was actually what I was watching when I first got into it, because they had hired a couple of long-standing European and international commentators. I think Anthony McCrossan and Simon Gerrans were commentating on the first one, McCrossan being a professional commentator and Simon Gerrans being an ex-cyclist, and they were a lot of fun. And then this most recent year, they hired North American riders, and I just couldn't square with people talking about miles when all the measurements on the screens are in kilometers. I'm like, come on, guys, please. I understand, though, it's for the audience. I get it. And I've kind of fallen in love with the Global Cycling Network crew. So I watch on online streaming services, and that works out okay.
Nice. So your book, Heading North, available. People can pre-order it now, and it'll be shipping on November 8th. Holly, where can people find you online?
Online, I am at HM Wendt on all the socials. You know, the Instagram, Bluesky. I think Twitter is done for. So I'm not even going to call it X. I'm just not.
No.
Let's just.
Other than that's where it is X.
It is an X Twitter,
Yeah.
expert app. But Instagram, Blue Sky. I guess I'm on Facebook, but nah, so's everyone's grandma. And my website is hollymwendt.com, where I have a calendar of events. And again, would love to see folks out and about. I have an event at the end of November, also in Philadelphia. So as part of the Blue Stoop reading series. And so, yeah, I'm, like I tell my students, I'm always around.
Outstanding. Well, Holly, thank you so much for joining me tonight on your inaugural podcast.
Thank you so much, Leah. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Finding Favorites with Leah Jones. Please make sure to subscribe and drop us a 5-star review on iTunes. Now, go out and enjoy your favorite things.